Okay, so we're going to be starting a new unit, our very first unit of the year, which is really exciting, and that's going to be short stories. And now the thing about short stories is that in order to talk about them, read them together, and analyze them, we all have to have um, the same vocabulary that we're talking about them with. So that's what this presentation is really going to be about, is going over so that we all have the same baseline of what we are going to be talking about when we discuss short stories. So for some of you, it might be review. For some of it might be completely new, and that's okay. We're all just going to get on the same page here. Now, with short stories, we have some learning targets for the unit, and this is what you're going to be tested on at the end of the unit. So these are things to always check back in and make sure, hey, am I getting there? Do I think I can do this independently with a new story? So the first thing is that you'll be able to identify and explain the plot structure and conflicts that occur within short stories. You'll be able to determine the theme of a short story and cite textual evidence that supports your analysis. And you'll be able to use close reading strategies to analyze short stories for literary elements. So all of these things, not just for this unit, but we'll be carrying throughout these skills throughout the year for all of our reading that we do. What is a short story? A short story is a brief, imaginative narrative that contains just a few characters, a very simple plot, conflict, and suspense, which leads to a climax and a swift conclusion. The first thing that we're going to discuss is plot. So one of my favorite authors says, "Plot is no more than footprints left in the snow after your characters have run by on their way to incredible destinations." Plot is really just the chain of events in a story, and there are 6 main ingredients. Now, as we go along, I strongly encourage you to take notes. So if you want to pause this video right now to get something to write with, I think that would be a really good idea. I also have posted for you a note sheet that I have created that's a summary of what we talk about here. That is posted out on Schoology that you can reference as well. But whatever notes you take are things that I might be allowing you to use later on for our short story test. So I, again, strongly encourage you to take notes because it's really going to help you remember and as you go along with your practice. So don't worry, I'm going to talk about each of these 6 ingredients separately, but the 6 of them are introduction or exposition, inciting action, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. This is what I want you to picture in your head when we talk about plot, and this is Freytag's pyramid. It starts with that exposition or introduction, then we see the inciting incident right there at the base of the pyramid, moving into the rising action, leading to the climax, the very top of the pyramid, falling into the falling action, and then the resolution. So we're going to be following this pyramid diagram when we talk about plot structure. The very first part of that pyramid, remember the flat part, is the introduction, which a fancy word for that is exposition. Exposition. This just introduces the reader to the setting, the basic situation, what characters are involved. There's usually some kind of narrative hook. Just grabs the reader's attention. Do you want to keep reading the story? Usually we kind of know within the first paragraph or 2 of a short story, first book or first page or chapter of a book that we want to keep reading. So that's really on the author. The exposition in Star Wars, you can see right there, is a really good example. It's just that scrolling text that sets up, like, here's the basic situation of what's going on. Here are the basic characters. Here's where we're going to find them. The end. And then action starts. Next, we have the inciting action, and that's going to kick off everything else that happens in the story. So if you remember, it was right at the base of the pyramid before we had everything that rising up. So inciting action is the first major action in the story. It sets everything into motion, gets the ball rolling. Something has to happen, usually to create a problem or a conflict, so that we have a story to follow. After that, we're going up the pyramid, or I like to picture it as a roller coaster here, because you're getting to the top. It's going to be so exciting. So it's just that building excitement, learning new things are happening, rising action. It's a series of things happening, carrying the plot along. And it usually includes these 4 items: foreshadowing, flashback, conflict, suspense. Now, with foreshadowing, this is a really good technique that authors use to hint at something that's going to happen later. Forward, right? Foreshadowing. I really like this image because it tells you, it's a really funny image of foreshadowing. We have little Anakin there, and his shadow is actually the shadow of Darth Vader, who he's later going to become. So we know in the end he's going to transform into this bad guy. Spoiler alert. And it's foreshadowing literally what's going to happen to Anakin. Flashback is when we're inserting an earlier event into the time order of the narrative. So instead of just saying 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., and going in order, we might say, okay, it's 1 p.m., it's 2 p.m., and oh, let's talk about what happened at 10 a.m. this morning. Okay, now we're going to move back forward. So you see that a lot in movies and television shows as well. Conflict. Conflict is the really key part of the plot and of the story. This is what is preventing the main character from getting what he or she wants. The plot is driven by the conflict, so it's so important. And usually the conflict is introduced with the inciting action, the inciting incident, often. Now, there are 2 types of conflict: internal and external. Internal, there's only really one category there. That's person versus self. So we're thinking about the angel and the devil on our shoulders. In your head is really where most of the problem is taking place, the conflict. So do I do this? Do I not? Do I go steal this candy from the grocery store? Or do I be honest and pay for it? Or like kind of anything that's really going on in your head. Do I break up with this guy or not? Internal conflict is something that's really the main problem. The main conflict is going on inside the character's head. Then we have 6 types of external conflict that we are going to talk about. External, like outside of the main character, outside of themselves. So the really obvious one that you can probably think of is person versus person. So maybe not necessarily just like a fist fight, but maybe there's 2 people that really don't like each other. Or if you've seen the movie Mean Girls, we have the plastics, and then we have the other groups, and they're in conflict with each other. Person versus nature. Think about Bear Grylls, how he's always going out into nature to try to do all this survival stuff, and nature is constantly trying to kill him. Or just a bear could come out of nowhere and try to run you down and eat you. That is person versus nature. The next one is person versus technology. You see this in a lot of like futuristic movies, artificial intelligence, robots taking over the world, or it could be something as simple as, hey, I have my cell phone in a class and I really want to learn and be a good student and get an A, but also my cell phone is so distracting to me and my friends are texting me and it's like lighting up and there's so much good stuff on my phone. So, person versus technology. Next, we have person versus society, and Mulan is a really good example of this. Person versus society is when the person is struggling with what society really expects of them versus how they actually are or would like to be. So with Mulan, society expects her to be, this girl with makeup on her face, going to the matchmaker, getting married, following her parents' orders. Meanwhile, Mulan, she wants to join the army to save her father from having to be in the army, to save her country, So we have this conflict between what she really wants and what she really feels versus what society is expecting of her. Person versus fate. This is really the idea of, can I control my own destiny? Or is what's going to happen already been predetermined? Has it been written in the stars? Has a higher power decided what my life is going to be like, or do I get to choose? So that's something that you'll see, especially in like mythology stories. And the final one is person versus supernatural. So it could literally be a ghost, or it could be, just different occurrences, a werewolf, a vampire, Dracula, right? Anything supernatural outside of the natural world. Then conflict is actually creating suspense. We have this conflict, this issue, and it creates this feeling of excitement, of curiosity. You're turning the pages because you want to know what happens. How is this problem, this conflict, going to be resolved? So then moving back to the plot structure diagram, remember we had our exposition, the inciting action at the base of the pyramid, leading into the rising action, which has foreshadowing, conflict, all of those things. Now we're at the top of the pyramid with climax. This is the highest point of interest in the story when the character usually is solving his or her struggles. That's a turning point. They've made a decision. Something is going to happen to solve this conflict. Usually it's the point of highest emotion, but it can be really subjective. So there might be different answers, and there's not necessarily one right answer in a story of what the climax is. You just have to defend your answer. So for example, if I asked you on an assignment or on a test what a climax is in the story, or what the climax is in Lion King, I can think of two different answers you could give. Maybe it's when he makes the decision to go home and face Scar. Or is it the actual fight and they're, resolving this conflict between each other, and he's trying to take back his Pride Rock? Both could be correct answers. Either one you could argue as like the highest emotion, the point of no return, this turning point. Again, as long as you support your answer with evidence, with your reasoning, you'll get it right. Then we have falling action. So this is as we're coming down the side of the pyramid. This is everything the character is doing to complete the action of his or her decision. So now we are going into this battle. We're fighting. Everyone else is fighting. He decides to kill Scar. He goes and rounds up his family. He goes and stands on top of Pride Rock and is like, oh yeah, here I am, I'm king again, right? So everything that happens after the climax. Until that last end bit, which is the resolution, the final workings of the story's conflict. This is when we usually tie up all the loose ends. So we're like, okay, good, like he's king again, everyone's happy, or, when we are just saying happily ever after they get married. There's sometimes a narrative twist, a surprise ending. So like if you think about Frozen, we thought, okay, the true love's kiss or the true love is going to come from this guy, but actually the true love is the sister. Whoa, twist. Or maybe it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that was the murderer after all. So surprise ending. The next thing that we're going to be discussing here is setting. So we have plot, which is everything that is happening in the story. Then we have setting. Setting is where the action is actually occurring. So it's both the time and the location, or time and place. For both of these, even if it doesn't say it was 9 a.m. on September 21st at Mount Wasanka High School, it might not give you all those details. You need to get as specific as you can. So you can't just say, it doesn't tell me the setting, so I guess there is none. You will not get points for that. So get as specific as it gives you. Think about time of day. Even it could be like, okay, I know this is happening at night because it's dark out and the character's talking about the moon. Or like the season, well, there's leaves crunching under feet, so that's probably fall. Maybe it happens in the past because they don't have cars, or maybe it's the present, maybe it seems like present day or the future because they are in flying cars. Get as specific as it allows you to be. So find the details in the story that tell you something about the setting. Same with location. Do we know the country, the planet, the town, buildings, or even just a general description of the surroundings? Are we outside? Are we inside? Are we underground? So as specific as you can get there. Setting really helps create mood and atmosphere. So mood is just the author's emotional attitude towards the subject matter. So maybe the author is writing about a story and you can tell like they're excited about it or they're nostalgic. Nostalgia is like that feeling of thinking about something in the past and going like, oh, that was so nice, right? You've done that. Oh, I remember when we had recess and we played on the playground. I really liked that. Nostalgia. So mood is not the mood of the characters, it's the mood of the author, the person writing the content. And then atmosphere is the feeling the setting evokes. So maybe the atmosphere created by the setting, if we're in like a dark woods with fog, I'm going to say this is like mysterious or creepy. Versus if we're in a bright sunshiny meadow full of flowers, that's like happy or cheery or, changes. It changes the atmosphere. The setting is important. The next thing we'll talk about is characters. So with characters, remember that characters are any personalities who are involved in the plot of the story. This could be people, it could be animals, it could be fantasy characters, right? So I'm not necessarily talking about a human when I talk about a character. Now our main guy, or main person, is called a protagonist. So usually it's a good guy or the hero. But you have to remember that sometimes our main character we're following is not a nice person. Maybe we're reading a story from the point of view of a serial killer. And there's like a lot of Netflix shows about that, right? So they could be the main person that we're following. They could be the protagonist, but they're not a good person, right? Because they literally murder people. So sometimes, but not always a good person. But it is the main character we follow. Think about Harry Potter. We have kind of three main people that we know that we are really invested in, which is Harry, Ron, Hermione. But who do we follow home every summer? Harry and Ron, or Hermione and Ron kind of stay out of the picture. We go home with Harry. We always are following him. So that's the character who's your protagonist. And that's usually the person that is trying to solve the conflict. The next is just the complete opposite. Antagonist, against, right? They're against the protagonist. Typically the bad guy or the villain in the story. They're the one creating conflict for the main character. Like Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. Be careful here because you need to think about what the conflict actually is in the story to know who the antagonist is. It's very easy if it's person versus person. Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. Easy. Protagonist, antagonist. But what about, there's a guy in the woods and a bear comes and attacks him. Well, if we're following the story of the guy and he's trying to survive, then the bear is doing the opposite and trying to kill him. So the bear would be the antagonist. Sometimes society is your antagonist. It just depends on what the actual conflict is. So something to think about. And finally, we have our secondary characters. So they're not necessarily trying to solve or create a conflict, but they help move the plot along. Maybe like Olaf, they provide a little bit of humor to the story. Final thing we'll say about characters is that when we're discussing characters, we want to think about character traits. So these might be the physical qualities and personality traits of a character. Usually these are revealed through what the character does. So we know that a person is probably mean and cruel if they kick a puppy, and they're probably kind-hearted if they rescue a puppy off the street, right? Might be what the character says. So maybe they say nice things to others and they like to give lots of speeches and they might be like really kind-hearted or really motivational. Or maybe they insult others and they're a bit of a bully. You can also get an idea of the character traits by what other characters are saying about that character. If a bunch of people are saying mean things and they do not like that character, then there's a reason. right? The author is telling us, hey, this guy is not necessarily a good guy. He might be a mean guy, it might be a bully. Sometimes the author just straight up tells you some character traits. He was 5'9", he had brown hair, he had a low voice, he was really brave and loyal or whatever. So sometimes the author just tells you, and that's nice. And sometimes it's what's being implied. So again, it's what you're inferring. And usually, again, that's all those things. What is the character doing, saying? What are other people saying about the character? All of those things can help you figure out, okay, here are some clues to what this person is like. So that's character. The final thing we're going to go over is theme. Now, theme is really important. As this quote says, you can't tell any kind of story without having some kind of a theme, something to say between the lines. So the key there is between the lines. You're reading between the lines. It's not what's happening, it's what you have to figure out. So this is a little bit more of detective work for you. Again, theme is a central idea about life, something about life, about the world that the story is highlighting. It's a main idea, a universal truth. It's a message that the author is trying to convey. So if we're reading a story about that the author is telling us about war and all the characters come away like wounded and sad and losing someone, probably the message has something to do with how war is really negative and how war maybe impacts people psychologically, something like that. So you have to think about, what is the author using the story to say about a subject? Theme, it is very important to know theme is never ever one word. If you just give me one word like war or friendship, I will tell you, wrong, not theme. Theme's also not a moral. So don't think about, you should always respect your parents. You should never lie. Avoid the always and never, right? Maybe it's more like, it is important to respect your parents in order to create a good relationship. That's a message. It's also not the general subject matter, so really avoid saying what the actual story is about. So don't give me a summary of the story that's not theme. In order to identify theme, we have 3 steps, and you're going to have a chance to practice that in a little bit. The first step is to identify what are the main topics of the story. Love, war, technology, friendship, kindness, something. Then you're going to choose one of those topics, and you're going to decide what the author is using the story to say about that topic. For example, and you're going to complete the sentence, the author believes that. What does the author believe? The author believes that war is unavoidable for flawed human beings. Those words that are in red are your theme. So again, let me reiterate. To identify theme, you identify main topics, you pick one that you want to write about, and then you complete the sentence. The author believes that, and what is their message about that topic? What have they used the story to teach us, to tell us? Oh, but how do I know? It doesn't tell me. How do I know? Again, this is detective work. So you need to consider the central conflict. What side of the conflict does the story take? So who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? How is the conflict resolved? Who wins and who loses? Those are all really good hints to how the author really feels about the subject. Authors really do make deliberate choices to get their point across. They don't just like, okay, this and this, bad libs out a story. No, they're choosing to tell a story in a specific way for a reason. So we're going to quickly practice. This is theme or not a theme. I'm just going to go through these in your head, or I guess you're sitting on a computer, so if you're not going to disturb others around you, you can say it out loud. And I want you to see if you have figured them out. So the first one. Red Riding Hood is about how you shouldn't trust strangers. Theme or not a theme? I would say not a theme. This is a moral more than a theme. So a better way to make it into a theme would be Red Riding Hood is about the potential dangers of trusting strangers, right? Because we gotta avoid always, never, should, shouldn't. Star Wars is a movie about Luke Skywalker. Theme or not a theme? Not a theme. Okay, that's just the character. So again, that's not really a message. What about Luke Skywalker? All right, Apocalypse Now is about the insanity of war. I would say this is closer to a theme, again, just like our first one. And I would count this as a theme, how war can be insane, how war can turn people, has the potential to make people insane. Number 4, this painting is about loneliness. Theme or not a theme? That's not a theme because theme is never one word. Good. Number 5, that story is about 2 guys who steal a car. Theme or not a theme? Not a theme because again, theme is not a summary of what's happening in the story. It's about the message behind what happens in the story. Romeo and Juliet's about love. Theme or not a theme? Not a theme. Again, theme was never one word. So if you just see one word, is about. Now, okay. So we're going to skip the rest of those, but I hope you have kind of a good idea. So think about avoiding what we talked about. And we're going to be really practicing now with our next activity. What I strongly suggest is you stand up, take a quick wiggle break, move around, get some water, and then come back and you're going to be working on the sneeches. Okay.